Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel for this long overdue video about the 1.5 update of Vital, which includes a bunch of new features which I can't wait to tell you about. So let's get going. Now, before we actually get going, let me say I tried my best to understand what these novelties were. Some I found on the forum, some I found elsewhere. Most I just found playing around and seeing what was what. So let's start from the obvious. The interface looks slightly different. As you can see here, the knobs and even the modulation destinations will have a slightly different graphics, but now there's no modulation since, as you can see, let's see, this thing looks slightly different from how it did originally. I'd say it's kind of clearer. I've been kind of liking it so far, probably just a novelty effect. Then there is this new save icon, which looks very different. That's a major change, but this is important. On the other hand, there's this undo and this redo button, which, well, might end up making the sound design process of many, including me, a lot smoother and less troubled. It would be nice to be saving, your sound a few times less, and this helps with it. Oh, I made a mistake. I liked it better earlier. Let's go back. Now, the places where there's most changes are this menu here and another menu, which is in the Advanced tab, which I'll go immediately to. And it is this one. We have a couple new Unison modes. We can have this octave +7. So it will split your voices between 1 octave above the fundamental and 1/7 in the upper octave, which is kind of interesting actually, because that would be in the harmonic series, and that's quite a good thing to have. Beyond that, there is also this subharmonics, which we did not have originally, and this is, well, I don't know what to think about it really, because I tried and I thought it's just subharmonics, so it's gonna get the harmonics below it, so it's gonna like halve the frequency and halve it again, so it's something I just thought, can I just tune down my oscillator a few octaves and then add harmonics on top? No, it's different. I don't know why it's different, but it is. And as you probably know, Mr. Matt Teitel, who I'm incredibly grateful towards for making this amazing synth I'm loving, and which has been my main synth for the last year and a half or so, he apparently doesn't like making manuals, which is not necessarily a bad thing, since there's a lot of people who make crappy manuals for things that are paid. This is for free. It's a wonderful synth, and I have to say, in most cases, it doesn't really need a manual. Nonetheless, going into this menu where I'm going to talk about these other things, there's, I tried to make sense of what was what, because it's not immediately that obvious. Let's start from the simplest ones. The random amplitude one now has, you can roll another seed for the random generator that decides, the random amplitudes. And this is interesting because, what happens is that, even though, of course, this is stationary, but I get a different series of they will be different, and you can go and try several times, resynthesize, randomize again, resynthesize, randomize again, and see what's what until you're happy with it. I mean, it has some possibilities, especially if you want to, say, superimpose two things which are, and not have the same seed for the random amplitudes when you're having more oscillators having random amplitudes. But I honestly think this is the least useful feature I've found among the new ones. I mean, yeah, but it makes sense, but it doesn't seem that useful. If you do think of an immediate and practical use for this feature, please let me know in the comments, because I'm curious about it. I really would like to know. Then there is this data compress, which, if used on a sawtooth wave, looks a little bit, actually a lot, like a low-pass filter. But if we're not just serving it a simple saw wave, but something slightly uglier, well, more interesting, with less deterministic, with more. You see, part of the character of this sound stays, but a lot of harmonics are taken away. It is interesting, as you can see. It's it will sound different on different wavetables, and well, it looks to me like an interesting alternative to, like at times you just want to add some part of the character of a wavetable to a sound and not the whole of it. And this does just that. It's like a sort, it's not what it is, but I think one of the most interesting uses you can make of it is making it like, like a sort of an intelligent EQ, removing what is not that important in understanding the content from an oscillator, which is kind of interesting when you're making a more complex thing. And then we go to the most interesting things, which are these three last ones, which are also the most complicated. Let's start from the simpler one, which is this filter. And let's get this back to be a saw wave. Now, I'd be better off watching the spectrum, but I suppose you all know what the spectrum of a saw wave would be, right? So if I go here and I make it like this will be just a pure saw wave, and that's exactly how it looks like. But what happens if I, from here, start moving this? It will work like a high-pass filter. And so how does this work? And what is this page here? Well, here just think like in the middle of this thing, which by the way you can put into this window all the shapes from LFOs, and from mod remappings, all the ones you already made, or you can use them or make your own, which maybe might come in handy for something else. So what happened on the, let's suppose we're looking here, right? In this point, like the cutoff frequency of the filter, let's call it like this, is right on the fundamental. This thing tells us what happens below the fundamental, or actually not below the cutoff frequency, and what happens above the cutoff frequency. So in this case, the filter we have is like some sort of a high-pass filter, as you already heard. If I did the opposite, I have a low-pass filter, right? And now it's a saw wave, and here I'm filtering it. You might wonder what this slider is, and it will be a lot clearer if you look at the spectrum. See, if I move this way, it makes the filter steeper. It's like something that controls the poles of the filter, and if you allow me, I think it's the order of the filter, or however you want to call it. So this way it's a little milder, and here it's it drops a lot sharper, which is also a possible modulation destination, which is kind of interesting. You don't usually get to automate the poles of a filter. Say you could be making say something akin to a pluck, even just automating this, like the other way around. Yep, of course, the other way around. Maybe let's add some to this too as well. This is, well, kind of obvious, but slightly different, and it is definitely something you can control, how much of this and how much of that you get, and you can shape your pluck in this case in a much more sophisticated way. Well, of course, you don't have a resonant control, but you have a lot of other stuff. Of course, if you go like do something like this, let me remove all these modulations. If you do something like this, you will get a bandpass. In this case, a very tight bandpass, or I can make a wider bandpass. And you can make a lot of other things. You see, like, for example, I could just get this thing up again and think, hey, what if I wanted a low-pass notch filter? Nothing easier. I just get here and make this thing wider so that it works even when I'm here. Add a little bit. Let's get it further. And sharper. And so we have a low pass notch, and yep, takes no time to turn it to a high pass notch, or whatever strange combination you could think of. I mean, you can make your own weird comb filters with, and there's really a world of possibilities. Say, I don't know, I'm gonna go high here and get it to be something like this. But for doing things like this, there's something more handy, which is a Spectral Flanger. Now, here I have to confess, I have a very hard time understanding in detail how this works, especially understanding how it is different from the phaser. But I'll do my best to try to make sense of this. So, one of the things here is, like, let's make it like it's a tight band pass so that you can kind of understand what is happening. You see, now this thing is like it was a tight band pass in the filter thing, but now you can, as you can see in the spectrum, this gets repeated several times. Let's make it a little less tight, shall I? Now, what happens is that it seems like the controls from this one to this one, relatively to unlike in the filter, you know, they're like just the opposite. Say, for example, I put another thing here, like I put something here, and so see, this is where my thing starts, and I have a fundamental. Unless I really go very high, this fundamental will not disappear. Let me get it. It seems like this is mostly determining the distance between the repetition, I'd say, of the filter and the spectrum domain, while this seems to determine the starting point. See, now here there's nothing on the fundamental, and the higher I go, I get more stuff. You know, I get these repeating themselves, but this is my understanding of it, at least. And if I go for the phaser, I get something kind of similar, but on a different scale, and which sounds very different. You will agree it does. I really don't know why. I mean, like, I know the difference between a phaser and a flanger, but I don't know how this thing could be implemented in this kind of situation. I really don't know this, but again, we can draw strange shapes and repeat them along all over, and we will get slightly different results. And something which is interesting, and you sure know already, in the Unison menu here, you can control the spectrum spread. This makes for a lot of interesting stuff, because of course I get see here, let's suppose I'll get a random generator to control this, a stereo random generator, and I'll make it bipolar. Isn't it quite complex for being something I did just out of a sawtooth? Because I mean, this is actually a saw wave just being processed and, well, slightly edited. So I said basically all I wanted to say about these new features. I didn't find any more. If you have, please let me know. And besides, I'm gonna be showing you some examples of how to make use of these features in your sounds. So let's go to this. So in this first one, I'm not using at all any of those options in the spectral menu, but I am using these octave +7 and subharmonics unison modes. The result is a pad which gets, you know, kind of rich and wide, even though these are mostly saw waves, even though there's a few small tricks up the sleeve of this patch. This one is kind of in the same direction. I'm just using again a saw wave and a square wave, but I'm getting this unison in different ways. There's subharmonics and harmonics, and it does have, you know, this big, rich, epic character, which I suppose you know, it does have its uses, doesn't it? Now we get to something a little bit more dynamic, which was actually the sound I welcomed you to this video. It's basically squelch. Though I'm using a sync, some sync on oscillator 1, and here I'm using this as a filter, this too as a filter, but it's, you know, basically the opposite of it, and this one with a flanger, with a very, very strange configuration. And some unison to make it all richer, and of course with some of those unison modes, and there's automations in a lot of, there's automation actual modulations on a lot of things here. Don't ever forget this thing. I mean, if you're using Unison, these knobs are your, I wouldn't say your best friend, but one of your best friends. I mean, making the sounds richer. When you're making Unison, you want voices to be slightly different, maybe even more than slightly different, and that's the way to do it. Here's another simple one, which is basically a sync. I'm using both the phaser and the flanger from my new features, and basically beyond that it's a sync. There's the mod wheel is controlling the phase. Well, I don't know what this parameter actually is. It's called frequency mode phase, but it's not actually a phase. Anyway, it's controlling this thing on both oscillators, which creates this weird effect. The pressure enhances the sync, and well, beyond that it's pretty straightforward. Now, this one is another pad which is, well, has more than a trick up its sleeves. What you might notice is that there's no effects. Actually, there's just a little bit of EQ, but it was a little bit too bright, and I didn't want to use some filtering. I mean, you see, the point is in this case about making, you know, saving resources and getting a lot of sound out of very little. In this case, as you can see, I'm using all 3 oscillators, but there's no unison. I'm not using the second the distortion menu. I'm just using the filters and the flangers from the new options, and of course these are wavetables. I mean, this is not really so, these aren't really just simple saw waves. But the point is, in this case, that I'm using them as I'm using this wavetable as a filter. Like if I look in here, what I did basically was using a frequency filter and using this as a real low pass filter for all 3, while this one is basically working as a, I call it a low pass comb, but I guess you can understand what it does. Now this one is kind of obvious, isn't it? And well, yes, it is kind of obvious. There's this thing here. It's being moved by envelope 2 and controlled also by the mod wheel. And I have this sort of double notch low pass filter, which as when I open the filter a bit, has a kind of a nice behavior, at least to me. I mean, I find it to be quite a nice bass. If I just remove the Unison, it is a bit, it's a bit tighter and it's mono, while here, if I get some Unison, I put it center drop 12 so that I have, the sub oscillator is actually mono. And last but not least, another pad. Yeah, of course, I mean, they're the kind of, sound that allows you for more complexity and more of this stuff. And this is making use of just one oscillator, no strange thing except, this center drop 12 happening in the Unison menu, except, well, there's a lot of these things. There's a lot of modulation of things going around. And well, this isn't kind of straightforward. Like, there's this filter which is kind of smooth and it's just set in the way I liked it, and then there is this thing, the LFO is controlling my position in this wavetable, which is a little bit more complex than you would think. Like, it goes from being a square wave, even though it doesn't look like a square wave, to being two different saw waves, so that I had, my sub oscillator being a square wave and the rest being basically a saw wave, but then with different phases too. Yeah, it's kind of complex to get all this sound out of an oscillator, but it does work well. Of course, there's some chorus, some delay, some reverb, and there is also this comb filter used basically as a flanger. So, well, this was it. And I hope you liked it, and I hope you found my sound examples interesting and whatever. If you did notice any other feature I missed, let me know. The 1.5 version of Vital isn't available to free users yet, but from the forum I read, it will be soon. It should have been available in the mid of June or so, and that didn't happen. But maybe it'll be available anytime. Maybe by the time you watch this video, you could use all this stuff for free, which is quite great, isn't it? And yes, this is it. Again, thank you for staying with me this long. If you have, and you still haven't subscribed to my channel, please do. Subscribers are always very, very appreciated. And if you have the time or wish to learn more about Vital, well, just go around my channel. I made plenty of videos about it, and also about a few other synths which, well, you might find interesting or not. Beyond that, in the description there's my link tree, and you will find lots of links to my music and to my gumroad, where you will find amazing patches for Vital I made with some free buys and some not really free buys, but there's plenty of patches, even just for learning purposes, if you like my sound design process. This said, thank you again for your attention, for this time you spent with me, and see you at my next video. Bye.